there, I'm Steve, and welcome to Jamsin Entertainment. I'm going to do a little housekeeping in the beginning of this video. I now have a podcast for those who are new to the channel. You can find the podcast on all your podcast platforms. And I've been uploading, with the exception of today, every Thursday a throwback review because of COVID-19. The theaters are still closed. I think they're opening up next week, or at least AMC is. I need to see what's going on there. I'd like to get back to new movies, even though I've been enjoying reviewing these older movies. Even though today's not really an older movie, came out this year, but on to the review. Today I'm talking about The Rhythm Section, starring Blake Lively and Jude Law. Blake Lively is the main character, and she's a young woman who lost her family in an airplane bombing. And this was never solved, or never seriously looked into for whatever reason. They don't go into too much detail about that. They do show the dark and reckless place that she took herself after the tragedy. She becomes a prostitute that's addicted to heroin. Not a good place to be. Until one day, she's approached by a reporter who has some information on the bombing. At first, she doesn't believe him, and she just tells him to get out. But he leaves his card, and I guess she figures, what the heck? I'll follow up on this. Maybe I'll get some answers to the questions that I've been asking for the last few years. So when she meets up with him at his apartment, the place is covered in research about this one bombing. And the story paints the picture that he's like the only reporter that actually cares about what happened. It's unusual that they're ambiguous about the bombing. It's not more the focus. The focus is Lively's character named Stephanie getting revenge. And this movie asks the question, what if an actual average person that went through such a tragedy sought revenge? And this movie does a very good job of answering that question, because it's not what you think is going to happen. So she's with the reporter for a time, but then when he's away, she goes through his records and finds the name of the guy who at least made the bomb. She sees what she can do there. She fails at that. But while she's also with the reporter, she learns that he has a source formerly of MI6. And so she leaves the reporter in search of the source. And she ends up finding the location of the source, but the source finds her, and they play it like an abduction scene, and she basically is being abducted. And the source gets a good handle on who she is and what she's been through, and realizes that she needs a detox. So he just basically locks her in this small cabin and gives her like the bare bones to survive the next few days or weeks. And then he starts asking her questions. It's a little while until they actually reveal that the source is Jude Law, because they shoot a lot of his feats and just basically her. A lot of this movie is focused on Blake Lively, on the character that is Stephanie. It's not a one-shot movie, but it has the feel of one shot because the camera rarely ever leaves her. It's definitely told from her perspective 95% of the movie. And it's a very interesting way to shoot a movie. I've never, or at least I can't think of a movie that does something similar to it, except for one-shot movies. And in shooting it this way, where you're with the character, you're more immersed in the story and you're more invested in the character because it's so personal. You don't really leave them, which makes for a very interesting car chase later in the movie. That is one continual shot, and it's very disorienting. It's very appropriate that it's very disorienting, because I've been in a couple of car crashes, and one of them landed upside down. So I can appreciate their take on this one car chase. But getting back to where she is with the source, and she's detoxing, she keeps on asking him all these questions about the bombing and all that, and what does he know, and how can he help her? He tries to deter her as best he can. You're not up for this. You're not built for this. You don't have the mental capacity. You're just not the person to do this. And she keeps on persisting, though. She goes through detox, she gets cleaner, and at one point he actually lets her out of the cabin, and he's going to train her. Well, she thinks it's going to be like basic stuff, like going over how to track people, how to do proper research, how to find people and stuff like that. No, they start jogging, or his version of a jog, her version of a run, because she's thin, but she's out of shape. And they don't put a mileage in how far they go, but you can imagine that it's for a few hours, and she is definitely not used to that kind of exercise. Jude Law's character, I can't remember if they give him a name. His character does not care. He's either going to train her or she's going to die training. And that actually comes up because at some point she got tired of running, and there was a huge lake there. And he said, all right, fine, strip. And she says, it's freezing cold outside. Yeah, strip. You're either going to quit or at least die trying to swim home. And so she does. She goes just, underwear, puts all of her clothes in the sweater that she has, wraps it around her, and she can't really swim. She even says she can't swim, and she basically doggy paddles all the way back to the complex. And each of these instances just proves to the source that she is determined to do whatever it takes to get revenge. The training is exceptionally brutal, especially when she asks him how to fight. He goes over like the very basic things. If they have eyes, push them out. If you claw them. If they're a guy, go for the very, very bare bones basics of fighting, which is basically primal fighting. There's no technique whatsoever. But she keeps on pushing him, and he says, "No, just eat your food," because they're in the kitchen. Just eat your food. She just keeps on pushing him for it. And at some point, he says, eat your food, and he sits down, they're both eating. And he just surprises her by smothering her in her oatmeal. That scene's intense and also done in one take. And I love this movie. This movie I find to be very realistic. And I really like movies that are like that. We're movies that bring you into the world that they inhabit. It gives you the feel that this could actually happen. So the title of the movie is called The Rhythm Section because part of the training, she learns how to use firearms. And like most people, they don't have their breathing down. And he says it's all in the breathing. Think of your heart as think of your breath as the rhythm section, and your heart is the bass. Or is it the other way around? All right, I had to look it up. Think of your heart as the drums, your breathing the bass. Once you get those sorted, you're sorted. That is a really good quote, and it's good for not just firearms training. It's a good practice for life. You can really get yourself in sync that way. Just take a minute, breathe, collect yourself, and then move forward. I really love the rhythm section. I highly recommend you get it on Blu-ray or 4K if you can find it on 4K. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on the rhythm section or other revenge stories, or the common person thrown into extraordinary situation. As I mentioned at the top of the video, I'm doing throwback reviews mostly on Thursdays. This is the exception week. Hopefully I'll get back to reviewing new movies coming out in the next week or so. You can catch my podcast on Saturdays. You can listen to it on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean. The latest episode coming out will be about Legos. I'm going to be joined by my friend Mike in Austin. If you like what you saw, like it. If you think other people like it, share it. If you really liked it, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and live your imagination.